Friday Facts number 443, or Planet Delivery. Welcome back to Factorio. My name is Nasty. Today we're going to be talking about one of the largest changes we've seen yet to how megabasing is going to be shaped in the 2.1 era of Factorio. So let's go over some of the basics. We've got a bunch of changes to cover today, so I'm going to try to be brief and be pretty quick with the discussion here. So we've got circuit networks. They alluded to this. This was kind of teased in the last episode where we saw a little bit of the outputs for specifically the connections you can make to the fluid network. And now this is all coming full circle of what that Easter egg of red and green meant. And now we're able to fully talk about it. So that's exciting. So what is changing? Well, first, we're going to have some changes now. You can go and connect even more things to the circuit network. So we're going to have the ability for boilers and heat exchangers to get connected to it, so you can turn them on and off. You're going to have the same thing now with landmines, and landmines actually will be able to, when they get tripped, you might have the ability for the circuit network to be interrupted, which would give you a very clear indicator that there is currently an enemy there. Where is that useful? It's extremely useful in situations where you want to conserve power on Gleba. So if you have a situation in which right now, if you look at the total power consumption, I've got a pretty high consumption right now, all coming from Tesla turrets. So those Tesla turrets are always constantly drawing power. But if you go and you disable them via the circuit network, they do not draw power. So that's a really good situation where you could have a nice little tripwire that's out here on the perimeter. And if anywhere on the perimeter around, let's say a train, like a cluster like this, where I have a giant outpost is gone and it tripped, that could go and activate all the Tesla towers, and then all those Tesla turrets could be enabled. So for early game, mid game, and even late game like this, where you don't want to have this massive grid of solar panels, you could have it so that it'll just temporarily enable when you randomly run into an enemy. So that could be kind of a nice power saving thing here, where you can just go and disable your very, very hungry power hungry devices here. So that's one immediate practical application of how you can use this. Although you, of the community, will of course find all kinds of degenerate ways to use this, so I'm excited to go and see what everyone cooks up. All right, biggest change, input-output splits. Let's start from the very beginning. As you can see, I was scrolling through this, reading through everything. So in the last FFF, as we talked about, they showcased the space platform set requests, and that they said it is also possible to use set requests in the same time as read contents due to a little bit magic of self-subtraction. This topic generated some discussion about the problems of the magic self-subtraction and possible solutions, and they're happy to say that they have solved it with a very clear difference of the red and green filtered inputs. This has been a request that the community's been asking for a very long time, and I'm so ecstatic to finally see this. The whole magic self-subtraction of especially in asteroid collectors, was really confusing to people, where you can kind of read the contents but also could set it, what the filters were, and that was really a problem because you'd have like you're reading what is currently in the chunks, but on the red wire, you're going and setting what it needs to be, and it wasn't consistent across the entire platform. So again, remember 2.1 is about kind of creating a more polished look and polishing a bunch of the rough edges around Factorio, and this is one of the best changes that I'm extremely excited for. So this means that you can very clearly set red and green filters on the inputs for your asteroid collectors. So that's one of the things, but it's not limited to that. You can do this on any machine. So you're going to have the ability to set the input to go and say, hey, these are things you're going to tell the machine to do. So commands rather. So turn on, turn off. You can have that on one wire. You can still connect it to both. As you can see, is like red and green are check marks. So you can select them on both. But then it's very clear if you're reading something from it, you can read it from the output of the machine, and for the inputs, when you're sending a command, you can go and send that on a separate wire. So now it's very clear you can separate those things, and that's going to make it pretty nice for separating and isolating circuits as well. So where is that practically going to be useful? So we can do it on trains, so that's going to be an aspect. You can do this also then here where we're reading the fuel on one end, but then you're turning on and off the other stuff on the other end. So these are all kind of more examples of where you can use this. This one I'm particularly excited about, and I'll tell you why. So over in my current base, one of the problems that I have specifically on Gleba is that I had a situation like this, where I have this outpost where I want to very clearly monitor the input incoming belts because I don't want to overproduce anything. So the whole point of this is that I want to have a very specific pulse that happens whenever a train comes and picks stuff up, and I want to know in the entire network exactly how much Yamako there is. Now, this is kind of a problem, and you're seeing this as a side effect with the amount of spoilage that's currently sitting in these requester chests. So there's probably a more clever way to solve this, but what I wanted was I want the ability to be able to read the contents that are currently inside here, be able to tell it to turn on and off, and I also want to be able to set the requests. Well, I can't do both. So it was more important to me to be able to read the contents that are currently in these requester chests, and then to go and set them to stop asking for Yamako in this particular case. But I would like to also be able to dynamically control how much Yamako I am load balancing between these different sides as the trains come in. So always prioritizing this side, but then balancing it so that there's always enough in the network to always supply the very first train. Not easy to do because I'm not able to read and set the requests of these items. And so then you see this situation where I'm not actually able to go and remove the spoilage that's in here, and some of it gets trapped. There's probably a more clever solution, and I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me how I'm wrong, and there's probably a better way to do it. But this is so simple now because you're going to be able to both read the content, so I know exactly what's in the whole entire network here, and I'm going to be able to set specifically the requests all by just very simply disconnecting the red and the green wires. So that's going to be a small practical example of where that could be useful, but I'm excited to go and see that here in this upcoming release. So that's one practical place where I'll be using it. Last but not least, because this comes up quite a bit on my particular channel, I've created a video about a year ago now where I talked about how the pollution control management, that trees are actually going to be the best for pollution control, and that's kind of taken over on the mega basing meta at this point, where pretty much everyone is using it so to control pollution. So right now, one of the things that exists now with this concept is that now you have the ability to specifically enable the harvesting conditions and the planting conditions. So that's a net new thing that didn't exist before. I don't think it'll practically make a huge difference with how I use it, because the way that I'm using it is over on Novice. I use it for all the tree farms to manage pollution, turning them on and turning them off very explicitly and tightly controlling it. So it's not going to make a huge practical difference, but it might be able to go and set like more tight control of like, hey, right now you can plant and you can harvest in these particular ticks. And we might be able to get around away from these little self-contained loop where this is reading currently nothing, but it is creating a self-reading loop where it reads its own contents and turns itself off whenever the wood is less than 4 is when it enables itself. So you might be able to control this more globally so everything happens exactly on the same tick. And I don't know. We'll see how that looks like. On Gleba, it might also have some practical implications where you can set a very specific harvesting time and a very specific, I want to just be planting during this time, so you might be able to control those a little bit differently, so we'll see how that actually turns out. Practically, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference immediately from just like my guessing, but this opens up the door a lot for people that are not outside of clocking, because not everyone's going to be clocking these things. You might be able to want to go and say, I want to go and create a huge planting and only plant during this time, and then I want to only harvest specifically when a train is coming. So I want to just be focused on harvesting right now, and then I want to only plant when the trains are gone. So that might be like a way to kind of min-max and be able to just focus on just pick up stuff first as a priority. So it might allow you to do some more clever stuff, and I'll probably experiment with that because I've got trains and I'm using them and I'm trying to min-max that. So that's exciting. Another huge change, we've got lab control behaviors. This is so exciting. If you've watched my channel, and especially if you watch the very long videos that I have about clocking the labs themselves and the inserters going into them, it's the largest and hardest challenge has been like, okay, you need to know what science is currently running so you can turn on the correct inserters at the right time to only insert the specific science that you currently need. And when we're looking at this, we're seeing that there's now a couple things that we have access to. So one huge difference is we can set research. So right now you're going to notice that I have a mod that is called, it's some auto research is what it's called. What it allows you to do is you can go, and in this case, I have it so that it auto queues mining prod unless I override it like I have right now where I'm doing research productivity. So that's because I don't want to every 4 minutes go and select mining prod again because I'm researching that overnight. And so that just allows me to basically use an auto clicker for that. This now brings that into the game so you can actually set the current research, and that is what you're going to be using. So specifically, like for me in the late game, it's really nice because I don't have to auto-click things, but it's also really nice if you have Gleba science coming in from a different planet. So That science comes in only occasionally because you don't really have enough production to keep up with it. And you just want to go and say, hey, I want to go and research something with Gleba science only when I have it. And otherwise, just use the novice sciences that I currently have in mass. So whatever you are in your playthrough, because not everyone's going to be making mega bases. So this is like a really nice thing if you want to just conditionally set things. I'm actually really curious how speedrunners are going to be using this and if they will use this tactic to conditionally set research based on when something happens to be in stock and when it's not. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how that meta evolves. Otherwise, the other thing I'm actually even more interested in than the setting is being able to read the research cost. If you know what the research cost is, then you know what current sciences are actively being researched. You know if you're using Promethium, you know if you're using Gleba, you know if you're using metallic or metallurgic science packs, etc. Why is that cool? Well, I created this incredibly complex mechanism over on Gleba to go and create a science monitor that reads the hand contents of this specific inserter and then keeps a memory cell of every single time it has swung up to a certain amount and then ticks backwards so that I keep a record of currently what science is currently running. And you can see that in here that I'm actually even having to import from Novice the other individual sciences that I'm not producing here locally on Gleba so that I can keep track of it constantly while I'm doing research prod. All of that goes away because you can just read the cost of the current science. So that's super exciting because that just means that if we're looking at it this way, one, they just made the enhancement so now radars can communicate between different planets. But now two, you can just use a lab effectively to just know what the current science is. So you could just have a lab on every single one of your ships even, and they could just say, hey, I won't need Gleba science because I'm not researching it. Go shut down completely. Or just have one active right now that just has to deliver bioflux back and forth. And you can have them all just sit over Novice and not request anything. So you can actually save a little bit on these space platforms having to go back and forth, but also you can set dynamically the request amount that you're having for the agriculture science that you're requesting. So that's nice because you can fine tune now your ships to only specifically say, hey, when I'm running Promethium, I want to request 96,000 because we can set requests now on the actual platforms. And then let's say I'm running for a 60-second research science, I could be requesting double that. So now you could effectively tune your individual ships based on what you're researching, which is just a much more elaborate way to do it is possible, like I was just showing, but it's a pain to do and not going to be very user-friendly for most people. Speaking of not user-friendly, my lab setup. Half of these combinators that are in here, specifically all of this is just to filter out and make sure that I don't accidentally go and pretend to insert on accident an extra agriculture science because this very first one where I'm again just reading all the hand contents because this happened to spoil. And what happens is like the way that I'm researching all this is that every single one of these labs that are up here are all controlled based off of this clock that I have down here, and that sets very specifically the inserters to be enabled or disabled on a very, like when a signal comes across, and that's what clocks them. But more specifically, I have always one lab here that is constantly scanning, and the reason is because I have to read the hand contents of the individual science so that I know what science is currently researched. That's how I know what current science is active, and I feed that into a memory cell, and then that is going to constantly keep active which individual sciences are currently being used. So when I'm using all these different sciences, I'm keeping a track record, and you're seeing a bug in mine where it will constantly keep ticking up because it's ever so slightly off over a very, very long period of time, as I've been researching this for a very long time. But the point, anyway, side the point. This all goes away. So I no longer need to read the hand contents, so that can all go away. I can have all the filters for Gleba completely out, and I can remove the memory cell, and then everything just is a very simple clocking mechanism with some basic changes. So my lab setup will be significantly easier because you'll be able to just read the contents from just one lab, and then instead have everything else clocked. I think you'll still need clocking in the end because, and we'll have to test this when 2.1 is actually officially here, but I still think you're going to need clocking in some instances because unless they change the automated insertion limits inside here, you're still going to have issues with stack inserters always desyncing if you use a basic clock. So that's at least my assumption. I haven't tested it, but we'll see what it looks like when 2.1 actually comes out. So a lot of simplification. And even though, yes, there's still some mad science that's going on with those videos that I've posted in the past where I've talked about research and using and controlling the clocking for labs, and I think it'll still be an issue, but we'll see. The other thing that I find is interesting in here, if you're noticing this, is that the user interface has changed, where like just noticing this, and this is me mainly speculating, but you see how there's all these like drain, like the remaining percentage on logistics science packs? I'm really curious if anything has changed with that. Speculating here, the fact that the UI has changed makes me wonder if science packs themselves have changed at all. But right now, kind of just speculation, what has changed with this? Maybe it's just a graphics overhaul, because I still see it for Gleba where it has that drain amount that's there, so it might be that it's still here. The reason I care is because if like science packs are no longer actually going to have like individual properties for being drained, one of the nice optimizations that could be made in Factorio for very large inventories is that then they can benefit from large inventories. If you don't know, one of the main reasons that like the hub has had so many like stack inserters are so expensive for the hub is because science packs have they're considered tools in the modding API. And that might maybe not exactly the correct word, so don't quote me on that, but mainly what I'm saying is they have some percentage amount. So since you don't know if a science pack had already been used a little bit, the large inventory optimizations that exist right now that have been shipped already before by Factorio, where it can kind of just keep a record of where is this item currently in this whole stack, so it could just start here instead of having to scan the entire inventory, doesn't really work with science packs because they all have this little property of their remaining percentage. So here's hoping that that changes, because if that changes and they still figure out a way to do daisy chaining, because I know that was one of the main blockers, was just allowing them to be daisy chained. I think that would be a pretty nice quality of life, not quality of life change, because most people won't notice it, but it would be a UPS optimization that we could benefit from. And I think it's especially important when we get to the next part of this whole entire thing. So the biggest change to mega basing to date, the landing pad unloading bay. So, up until now, how do you get maximum throughput through a landing hub? Well, let me tell you over here. You need some cursed stuff like this. You need to have a lot of bots pulling everything out because you have only access to the couple little areas here where there's inserters that can pull things out. This is about as maximum throughput that you can get without bots here, which I've optimized for Gleba. And I've done also for Prometheum here because I'm running Prometheum quite a bit. But it makes it so that you cannot benefit it from everything else, and you need to have a lot of requester chests here. And a lot of people have scaled up their bases significantly further than I have. I'm quite a bit behind in terms of the max size of bases, and that's because we're well over the 60 UPS mark, because we could scale up. That's a whole nother conversation of why we haven't done that. I've talked about it before. But anyway, the point of where I'm going with this is that this is going to, for mega basing specifically, the fact that we have something that can extend the range of what you can pull out is going to be massive, because that basically means that bots are dead. What do I mean by bots being dead? So what are the things that are relevant for UPS that you would like to research once you have everything unlocked? Well, most likely right now, the meta has been worker robot speed, mining productivity, and research prod, because these are the three things that still give you benefit later on, because everything else is hard capped. All of the sciences like LDS and blue circuits, those are all going to be capped to 300% productivity, because that's the maximum you're going to get out of a machine. So worker robot speed was a nice one, and I've actually really appreciated, because there's been 2 or 3 different people in my actual community that have scaled up worker robot speed up to like beyond 15 million effective science per minute, so 3 times the size of my base. And it's been really cool to see that they made bases and save files specifically dedicated to making worker robot speed faster, because you have the faster that they can actually deliver items means that the longer they can be running, and you need less bots in general that are going to be active here. So it was a perceived UPS optimization that you could have by continuously researching worker robot speed. Of course, there's some diminishing practical effects of that, because you won't be able to forever research this. But it was cool to see some of those bases that are going to kind of be obsolete now, which makes me pretty sad. Because really, like now in the end game, there really isn't a lot of interesting things to do. And we've kind of been put into a position where once you've gotten physical projectile damage high enough and stronger explosives high enough, there aren't any more practical until the levels that you could research to get you to the point where you actually have for example, the next break point of stronger explosives would take me well over 5 years to actually go and research. And I'm never going to go do that to hit another break point. And then the one after that is like the heat death of the universe. So these things scale to a point where it doesn't practically make sense to even research them anymore. So, but there still was a sense that worker robot speed effectively continues to scale by an additional 65%. You could even argue that research prod doesn't really scale that much because only 10% chance or 10% of the amount for each level that you research. But mining prod made total sense. It's a relatively very cheap cost to actually produce, and each one keeps on giving you 10%. So mining prod always makes sense as something to go and research. So now we're kind of stuck. We got research prod, we got mining productivity. So it kind of makes the variety of mega bases you're going to see are going to be, we effectively remove one thing, but it makes me sad that we're not going to see worker robot speed bases. Maybe we will, but there will be less of an argument for practically why are you actually researching that thing. So that makes me kind of sad with this change. However, it is an objectively good change, I think, because it allows us to now explore other things. Like we might want to go and explore what does utility science production over on Fulgora look like, because you get most of the end products that you already need just from scrap. With the throughput limitations being resolved, that now you can very easily extract Q1 science out of the hub without any real bot overhead and doubling the number of bots you need. This could make like a significant shift in the quality meta that we've been discussing here on my channel quite a bit over the last year. Now, I don't think it's going to change everything, so I think there's still going to be a lot of situations where Q2 is better, and that's specific in the situations where they're just objectively better before you even get to the hub. So like Aquila, we've measured, is objectively better here in Q2, and we didn't even take the hub into consideration. So that means like some of these things will stay, but some of the things that we'll have to go and test out a little bit more is like, is Vulcanus really better in Q2? Don't really know. And is Fulgora still better in Q2? Potentially. It's just more like now we need to consider like, okay, the hub is no longer really a consideration for a bottleneck, because it's just like you're halving the number of inserters, which is going to be basically a fraction of the amount of cost. But it also makes the testing much easier because you really don't need to simulate all the bots and then what research level of bot speed you have, etc. So it does make the testing easier. So more things for us to explore. So this is exciting. Just what they're showcasing here in this graphic is that you can now have the trains actually coming through. I don't think the train meta is going to shift at all. I don't think they've actually done enough to actually make trains viable as of right now. So I know the thing that's making me sad is where they were talking about it is that they had originally, when the traffic increased to the point you want to unload into trains, you eventually get to a state where you're placing roboports everywhere so you can meet the demand. Initially, we thought we'd specifically make a train loader, which is what Arendelle prepared concept art for. However, when Jaroslav was in the process of making the graphics, we hit some severe issues, and luckily this made us reevaluate. I'm sad that's gone. I was really hoping that we would have something to make train loaders a reality, because I really want trains to come back for mega basing. If you're min-maxing UPS, I still don't think they're going to be practical. The extra transfer, the extra overhead from the trains are just not going to even make sense. And how big of a trains that you're going to have, they're even showcasing this here. We're going to have, I think you're going to need way bigger trains than what they're actually showcasing here. So I don't think the meta is going to change at all, which makes me pretty sad because like I'm using trains on Gleba. I'm loving using them. I'm something that I want to continuously use in my mega base, but it's going to be a hard thing if you're just perfectly min-maxing UPS. There's an argument if you should even like care, like should you be strictly only focusing on that? And maybe not. Maybe we're being a little bit too prescriptive, but I'm focusing on, I'm going to take it just from the blanket statement of like pure min-max UPS. Trains are still not going to be it. And it makes me sad that we don't have something that can just instantly unload in one big stack all of the items onto the train, and the train can just instantly take off. That would reduce a lot of the actual inserter overhead of having to transfer everything over, and would have made trains actually like the go-to option probably for cargo pad unloading if that was the main option that we had. Now what you'll probably see is more just unloading to belts, and that'll be like directly to belts from these, and that'll be probably all you're really going to see from this, from the mega basing side of things. So a bit sad it doesn't hit the mark for me, so I'm a bit sad about that, but overall I'm still excited positively here that we have much bigger throughput, and the actual unloading of science is no longer a bottleneck. That's huge for mega basing. Okay, planets in the background. You're seeing this constantly in my save piles. I specifically use well, let me go and find one that's actually hovering over Novice. I'm using a particular graphic design that's been made by Omega. So I really love his designs and his actual art for these different planets. And I'm actually hoping that they will go and make the same exact graphic change and adapt it for 2.1 because there's a lot of new fancy stuff that's been unlocked for this. So they've made this now a big globe. And this globe now is just a sphere that can be rendered. So like, I think like the art that actually has been done here is like, compared to what I'm used to right now, is pretty ugly. But to be fair, I understand, again, Factorio has limitations of not going and loading a huge amount of stuff into VRAM. We've talked about it on the last FFF, and like having backwards compatibility. And also load time does go up when you're loading a huge sprite like we have over some of these planets. Like having this is actually a pretty big load time increase because it is a pretty large asset that needs to be loaded. And some people don't want that. So I understand the balance of like trying to have like a minimal still kind of like graphic like this while still allowing it to be part of the vanilla game. There's now small little animations that seem to be available now. You have small rotations of the planet. There seems to be moving clouds on there. So it seems like for the modding community, this is going to be really nice to make very, very rich looking planets. Like, look at this. This is what I really like. I like the lightning storms coming up over Fulgora. So actually, big shout out. I know I was just hating a second ago on the graphics, but honestly, this looks pretty cool. I really like this Fulgora graphic. This is a pretty cool look to this particular one. So in general, I know this is like, they even said this is something that they always wanted in 2.0. They just ran out of time for things, like said in the last FFF, where they didn't even have time to go and repaint the rocks on Gleba. So I know a lot of the stuff was rushed out. So it's nice that they were able to come back, polish this up, and then hopefully the experience of using these will be a nice quality of life immediately if you're playing strictly vanilla. But then for modders, you have access to more stuff on how you can actually render the planets, and will give some graphic designers a fun time going in and updating this. So pretty cool stuff to see that. So finally, there's a couple small changes that come outside of this. This is where we're kind of done with the major changes that are coming out, and most of the things that I'm excited about. So we've got the ability to go and connect pumps to trains in all kinds of different orientations. So it's not just relying on it being straight. Now you can connect it in any way. Cool. Great to see that. I won't be practically using this a lot, but it is cool that you can have these weird orientations and curve it around the land a little bit more. So if you are now more of a person who's interested in, I don't know, maybe you're making more spaghetti factories, this might be a nice like quality of life for you specifically. Won't impact me, but you know, hey, I'm not every player, so be cool to go and see that. And they even call this out here, no matter how cursed your station design is, it'll always go and connect. So it's a nice thing for new players too, and that's what I gotta also remind myself is like new players don't know that this is a mechanic, so they'll go and they'll create like a curved stop like this, and they'll go, why can't I connect my fluid pumps? And then they won't know why. Now the answer is really clear, like they don't have to worry about it. So again, a good thing for allowing more types of designs to be created, so, and less limitations. I think I can't really complain about that. I think that's a good thing. So the next things that we've got here is some more graphic design changes. So they've touched up the oil refinery. I like the way this looks. This is kind of like a lot of kind of like overall sprites were left a little bit behind in Space Age. So they're updating this to look more like and to feel more like the rest of the graphics that they have. I'm a personal sucker for graphics. I love the little cog also constantly moving here, driving this cam motion to go back and forth, drive a pump going up and down. There's actually some nice little attention to detail, and it's cool that it's actually rotatable, and then it keeps that animation from different perspectives and is pretty consistent. So I'm actually a huge fan of the way this looks. I think this is a pretty nice touch. And then practically, you know, it'll show up in more playthroughs because I do use these buildings quite a bit. So it'll be nice to just see those and having nicer animation qualities to them as a whole. So, and lastly, the assembly machine is getting a completely new graphic design. So I love this. These machines have kind of been left in the dust for a while. So being able to know that we are going to see them after all this time finally updated to have new graphics inside of them, these look really cool. They're very rich textures. Like overall, this is a pretty cool looking machine. And then this is, again, a lot more complex. You have a lot more just random belts and things moving inside here, and this is now kind of again bringing everything full circle to be more aligned with the other types of buildings that we have, and it makes it look like a lot more of a cohesive it doesn't make it look as out of place. I'd still say that these furnaces are a little bit out of place with the way that they look, but otherwise, you know, that's probably the only minor thing that I've got in terms of if we're talking about graphics specifically. So cool thing to see this. Big thing, we are really happy to have you all join this journey with us and hope you'll all enjoy playing 2.1 next week. I don't know if that means this upcoming Monday or this next week Friday. I don't know what that means, but maybe they mean by the next feature FFF, or I don't know. So hopefully we'll get an exact answer soon, but I'm excited to test out these mechanics and especially to go and test out some of the UPS optimizations that I know exist and being able to share that with the rest of y'all. So stay tuned, subscribe if you're interested in that. And then otherwise, I'm excited for 2.1. Don't get it wrong. See you in the next video.